Hi everyone, Jesse here with eTrailer. Today we'll be taking a look at, and I'll show you how to install the Roadmaster Comfort Ride slipper spring system with shock absorbers on our 2024 Grand Design Momentum fifth wheel toy hauler with triple axles. Here's a closer look at our Comfort Ride installed on our neighbor's vehicle. There's going to be two boxes because we have three axles, so it'll sit between the axles. And this is really nice because it keeps each axle independent from each other, whereas with your factory setup, or what we actually took off of our neighbor's camper here, it has an equalizer system, so technically all of the leaf springs are going to be connected to each other. So whenever you're hitting bumps or anything like that, they're not only going to react to this axle reacting to that bump, but you're also going to feel it in each of the axles at the same time. It's just going to be a lot rougher of a ride and just not as smooth. Another nice thing about this kit is you have the ability to add on the shocks here. So each axle has its own shock, and just like a car, that's going to dampen and soften any bumps, and it's going to make you handle a lot better. When we're installing this, we're replacing our factory leaf springs here, which are double eyelets, and we're replacing them with these slipper springs. The slipper springs are really nice. They're going to be able to handle more weight and also involve a lot less maintenance because you only have one eyelet, one bushing to worry about. And Roadmaster puts these never fail bushings in here, which are basically maintenance free once it's installed. You don't have to worry about greasing a Zerk fitting or anything like that. Whereas with these factory leaf springs, you would have to keep greasing these just to keep them going. As for your shocks here, they're pretty standard nitrogen-filled shocks. As I said, they're just going to absorb bumps on the road and help you keep that nice smooth ride. A lot better than not having any shocks, as you probably do right now. We all know that a camper is a huge investment and you want to protect it. With your factory suspension, you're not only feeling it while you're towing it in your truck, but it's also beating your camper up going down the road and shaking and vibrating like that. Whenever people ask us what the first thing they should upgrade on their camper is, we almost always recommend the Comfort Ride system. It's just such a huge improvement over the factory stuff. The next step after that is actually some disc brakes like we have on our neighbor's camper. But really, the Comfort Ride comes first. It's just going to protect your investment of your camper and make you more comfortable out there on the road. As for the installation, it is a pretty difficult job. It does involve drilling into the frame of your camper and removing all of your factory components. This is something that I would definitely recommend checking out our dealer locator. Find somebody local to you that can help you get this installed. But if you just want to see how this all gets set up, then follow along and I'll walk you through that. If you have experience with the Comfort Ride on your camper and you just want to share your opinions with us, please feel free to leave a review or a comment. To begin our installation, we'll need to get our wheels removed. I have a 7/8 socket. I am using a chrome socket just because if you're using a impact socket, it seems to scratch the wheels. Let's get all of our lug nuts off and get these wheels set aside. Now we'll start tearing apart our old suspension. Make sure before you begin that you have each axle supported with a floor jack or a jack stand. I do have a 15/16" socket just holding this bolt in here. It's splined, it shouldn't spin, but just in case. And I have an 18mm socket on the nut. Now we need to hammer that bolt out. I just threaded the nut back on just a few threads just to keep from mushrooming the tip of that bolt. Hammer it out. Once you get past those splines, it should hammer pretty easy. So I'll get to that point and then use a punch the rest of the way. Now we'll disconnect the front side of this leaf spring. This is also an 18mm. Now we'll take our U-bolts out of our leaf spring. This will be a 19mm socket. Now it's essentially the same process. We're just going to work our way down and get all 3 of our leaf springs removed. Now with all of our suspension out of our way, we can get ready to set up our box. We'll have one mounted on each of the center perches here. And before we get it up into place, we just want to make sure that there's nothing in our way, any of this fabric, if it's interfering with that, because we want this to sit as flush as possible. So if you have anything in your way, just take it out or cut it out, and then we can get ready to bolt this up. So before we get our box into position, we'll also need to put this spacer in here. So if yours is too tight, your bracket here, you can just use a adjustable wrench and bend it out. Ours is actually a little loose. We want this to be snug, and it's going to be easier to install if it's just held into place. So I'll just take a hammer and give it a few good whacks. So once you get it to where it will hold in place like that, we'll take our box and one of our large bolts, just slide a washer over it. We'll slide our box into place and slide that bolt through our hole. Once you have the bolt slid through, just put another large washer on the back and one of our nuts. We're going to leave this loose for now. So now on the underside of our box here, you'll see 4 holes. We'll need to drill into our frame rail here to 21/64 of an inch. Kind of a weird drill bit size, but I'm going to start with a smaller bit to kind of make a pilot hole. The only thing you'll want to watch out for is you want this to be even all around, so just kind of feel with your fingers, make sure that you're centered up, and then start drilling. Aim for the center of the hole so you still have some adjustment. Once we have those holes drilled out, we'll take our self-tapper and apply some red thread locker to it. Then we'll run that into our holes with a 14mm socket. Once you have all of your bolts in your box bolted up, we can torque them down. And once we're done torquing those down, we can torque this bolt. And then we'll move on to our next box. It's going to be the same process. Just make sure you're over your other 2 axles. We're ready to put our leaf spring into place. You'll see one end has an eyelet here. The other end just has a bend to it. The eyelet end is going to go into our factory bracket. So we'll just slide this over our axle. Your kit should come with these splined bolts. We're going to replace our factory wet bolts with these. So we'll just get that slid through our eyelet. And then I'll have to go around the backside and hammer those splines in until that bolt head is flush with our bracket. With that hammered flush, we can install the nut and tighten it down with a 7/8 socket. Now for this end of our spring, we'll need to slide this spacer block in. So one thing I found is I did have to go back and loosen this bolt just because that was compressing our bracket here. I'm also using a pry bar to spread this out. That should help you be able to line your spacer block in. Then we'll slide our bolt through. That leaf spring is going to sit on top of that. This piece here will sit on top of our leaf spring like that. It's kind of going to keep it from moving back and forth too much. So we'll just slide that into place. Have to get it lined up with this hole. And slide your bolt through and put the nut on the other side. So the front and the rear axle will install essentially the same way. You'll use the eyelet on that factory mounting point, and the box side is set up the same way. For the center, since we don't have a factory mounting point, it's just a little bit different. So right now I'll just slide this into place, let it rest on our axle. So the eyelet will be on the front, and then the angled side will be on the back bracket. So for the eyelet side, what we'll have to do is slide these spacers on the outside of our leaf spring just to fill in that gap. So for the first one, what I like to do is kind of get that lined up. So you should have enough room to slide your spacer in and get your bolt slid through so that'll hold it into place. Then position your leaf spring, get your bolt slid through the eyelet of the leaf spring, and do the same thing on the back side with your other spacer. Then it's the same thing with our bottom hole. We'll slide this cylinder in and get our bolt slid through and put our nut on the back side. And for the box side, it's the same process as all the other ones. You'll put your block through with your bolt, and then on the top, you'll use this piece with the wings kind of hugging onto the leaf spring. One more thing that is different about the eyelet going into our box here is we need to put this plate in. So what this does is just keeps this bolt from rotating and damaging your bushing. So we'll just take that bolt back out that was just there to hold up our spring, reinstall it. Then we'll just have to get our bolt turned so that it will line up. So now with our leaf spring, we have a guide bolt on the bottom, and there's a corresponding hole on the top of our axle. We'll have to get that lined up, which may take some wrestling with it, just depending on where your factory stuff is located, but just like to line it up, and then you can lift up your axle with a floor jack and make sure everything is going to sit flush for you. The center one is going to be facing towards the front, and so is the rear one. So your front one's the only one that's going to be facing the rear. Pretty easy to think about. You just want it facing towards our slipper spring box. So we'll take our factory tie plate, or I have a new tie plate that came with some U-bolts. I did get some extended U-bolts just to make it a little bit easier. I find these leaf springs are sometimes just thicker than your factory ones, and it's hard to get your factory leaf springs tied down to your axle, but that's your choice, really. You may be able to just not include the factory tie plate and use your factory U-bolts. If your U-bolts are fighting you a little bit because they're too wide, you can take them to a bench vise and just squeeze them to get them to slide into place. But we have ours slid into our new tie plate, and then I'll put the factory one on top of that. And then with these, I'll apply a little bit of red thread locker and get our nuts installed. We'll just repeat that process with the rest of your springs and then tighten and torque everything down. For our shocks, we just want to make sure that the dust boot, which is a thicker portion, is on the top, because if it's upside down, then it's not going to do its job. But this is just going to attach to our hole on the back of our bracket here. We'll start by sliding a washer over a bolt, slide that through your shock, put another washer, then your spacer washer, and we'll put one of these angled washers on. Right now the orientation doesn't matter, we're just going to leave it loose. Slide that into our box, And get your other angle washer, slide that over the bolt, top it off with a washer and a nut. For our extension bracket, we'll have a couple of options. You'll see there's some different holes here. So you can either have it like this, depending on your shock length. With our setup, we're just going to leave it at these top two holes. That's going to line us up pretty much perfectly. So we get those top two holes, slide our included bolt through. And one thing to mention, you'll have two sets of nuts in your hardware kit, and they're super similar, but the bolts that slide through this extension bracket will take the ones with the white plastic in them. The other ones will not want to thread on correctly. So we'll get these installed and we can tighten these down. We'll tighten these down with a 19 millimeter or 3/4 and a wrench on the nut side. For mounting the bottom of the shock, we'll put a bolt with a washer outside in, then we'll slide our spacer, another washer, and take our shock, get it to slide through that bolt. We'll put a washer and a nut. Now the first bolt on our shocks that we'll tighten down is the top ones, and first we need to get our wedges lined up how they need to be. These are just going to help kind of tone down the angle of the top of the shock here. So what we'll want is this one that's outside of our box. We want the wider side pointed down, but in down we mean in relation with the shock, so line it up with the angle of the shock. And then on the inside one, it'll be the opposite, with the skinny side pointed down in relation with the shock. The easiest way I've found to do this is to leave the bolt loose, get your inside one lined up, then put your wrench on it and kind of put force against it so it won't spin on you. And then you can focus on the one outside your box, get that lined up, and tighten it down with a 19 millimeter. Once you have the top bolts tightened down on all of your shocks, you can tighten down the and cut off your strap or just pull it off. Then I like to just go over every bolt that we've installed because there is a lot of hardware. Just double check, make sure everything's torqued down and looks right. Once you have everything torqued, the only other thing I would worry about is just make sure that none of your brake hoses are going to get interfered with by the suspension. I did have to kind of relocate a couple of our brackets just because we do have aftermarket brakes on ours. But other than that, that's going to do it for our look at and installation of the Roadmaster Comfort Ride System with shock absorbers on our 2024 Grand Design Momentum.